All right. So today's topic is going to be how to attain spiritual depth, and the objective of these sessions is really to analyze key problems that we might be facing as people who meditate, and trying to find solutions for them. So one of the most important obstacles that's there in our way is how do we go deeper in our spiritual journey? How do we get a deeper experience of meditation? And this problem, quite unsurprisingly, is also with a lot of experienced practitioners, and that's the thing. While some of the other problems, some people might face, but not many might actually be facing that problem. This particular challenge or problem of being able to go deeper is almost true or holds good or is faced by nearly everyone who practices meditation. And so I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at what are the causes for this problem, and how some of the solutions can be implemented. So, with that said, today's session is going to be first, I will go over the topic for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go over for just one meditation, which will be a single deep meditation. And I deliberately wanted to keep that pattern today, so that we can have a longer meditation and a deeper meditation as opposed to two meditations which are more like 10 or 15 minutes. With that said, let's get into the topic. So this is a problem for everyone, I should say. And if somebody doesn't have this problem, then they probably do not know how deep or how deeper they can still go. It is definitely a problem for me, and I continue to struggle with it. I would say at times, yes, it's good. It's not really a struggle for everyone. But it's definitely at least a nice to have or an aspiration for most people who are on the path of spirituality. And the thing is that spiritual depth is relative. As we go deeper, we discover even more things, and we find that the depth, there seems to be no bottom, so to speak. And it is truly that way. Spirituality is infinite. The levels of depth that we can reach are literally infinite. So what tends to happen is as we go deeper, we find that we still can go deeper and there is a lot more to discover. And also what happens is as we go deeper, we tend to learn and uncover more and more things. So when we are at the surface, yes, we can see that there is some level of depth. We anticipate that. But as we go deeper, we find that the depth is even greater. And the deeper you go, this you find that this discovery of how much more there is to learn keeps increasing all the time. So in a way, it is almost like there is no end, because you're chasing infinity, which is theoretically not possible to win. But the idea here is that even if we all manage to go to a certain level of depth, then the experience in our lives is tremendous. It can change our lives and it can give us so many benefits. So the struggle or the challenge manifests itself in a few ways, and I'll go over that. The first thing that's common for people is to realize that we tend to plateau, or our progress tends to plateau at a certain level. And for people who you could say have spent a few months or maybe even a few years or even a few weeks, what tends to happen is that we get our self realization in a practice like Sahaj. We learn how to meditate. We even become regular in our meditations. But at some point, what tends to happen is we then plateau out. We begin to struggle for going or getting up to the next level, which is feeling the vibratory awareness and so on and so forth. And I've listed a few of those. The first thing after the plateau, when we discover the plateau, is that we are unable to feel deeper states of meditation. Let's put it that way. We can see some benefit. We feel that meditation is a good experience. We feel it's giving some benefits, and the benefits are visible. But if we like to take it to the next level, then we begin to find it more difficult. And the deeper state of meditation is also kind of similar to the depth analogy that I gave. We cannot fathom, or we cannot understand or experience what a deeper state of meditation looks like. So, in that sense, we don't know what we are aiming for. This is not like something material, like a house, for example. Okay, you have a home which is of a certain size. You know that you want to buy a home that's maybe twice the size, for example, right? And there's a finite goal to it, and you know how that is going to feel like. This is not like that. Deeper state of meditation, part of the problem is most people who do not touch deeper levels do not know what it is to be experienced, right? So we don't know what we do not know, and that's often true when discovering depth in the states of meditation. But we do know that we are missing something. We'd like to keep making improvements. And I think the thing that is sure and guaranteed is that there is always a lot more to discover when it comes to spirituality. In fact, I would say that every one of us is probably not even touching the tip of the iceberg. No matter how deep we go, there is so much expansive benefit and deeper states of meditation going inward, that we barely touch the surface and we get a few benefits. Now, there is an actual, you could say, a quantitative metric, so to speak, or a number that helps us understand this. Now, our founder of the Sahaj practice has told us that we all raise our Kundalini energy, and this whole practice of Sahaj works through awakening the Kundalini energy and taking it, raising through the central channel and taking it up and through the Sahasrara chakra, for it to again penetrate, and then for our spiritual self to connect to the all-pervading power. The truth is that in that process, whenever we get that spiritual awakening, only a handful of strands at best of the Kundalini energy rise. Now, the Kundalini energy is comprised of threads, or you could say it's like a rope made of several threads, and the number of threads is a very big number, probably in millions, right? But the number of threads that actually are awakened and rise are a mere handful, and sometimes just one or two. So you can think of how much more depth there is, so to speak, right? If we are able to meditate, awaken our Kundalini energy, gets a reasonable level of benefit with just one or two or three strands of the Kundalini energy rising. What would happen if a million strands of our Kundalini energy all rose, right? What would it feel like? Nobody knows, right? But that gives us an indication of the potential and how much of depth we can actually touch if we really desired and if everything worked out and so on, right? So that deep state of meditation, we all know, and we should know that it is infinite. We can keep going, going and going and going, right? There is no such a thing as I'm done, this is enough, or this is all I'm going to get. It all comes down to how much effort we put in, how much patience we have with ourselves, and many other factors which we'll go through. So that inability to feel deeper, continuously deeper states of meditation is the way it should be described, and continuously evolving benefits in every facet of our life. If we are not able to feel that, then that means that we've kind of reached a plateau. So that's one indication of not being able to progress. The other most important indication in Sahaj is if we are not feeling that all important state of thoughtless awareness. So we call this state of meditation, it's a state established in a higher consciousness. We have different levels of consciousness. The simplest examples are our sleep is, and deep sleep is a level of consciousness, and being awake is also a level of consciousness. Similarly, being in meditation is another level of consciousness that we attain in the practice of Sahaj. And in that state, we are fully awake, and that's where the word awareness comes. And then we are also without thoughts. So imagine when we are completely alert, we are feeling completely relaxed, and we are in that higher state of consciousness where we experience no thoughts at all. That is the crucial state of meditation. It is called as thoughtless awareness, and it is almost like a state that manifests of its own. and it is simultaneous with the rising of the Kundalini energy. So when we are awakening our Kundalini energy, when it is rising, it lifts us into that state, so to speak. It lifts our attention into that higher state of consciousness. But the challenge and the struggle comes when we are unable to either experience the thoughtless awareness, or we feel it in bits and pieces, and we are not able to kind of have a continuous experience. This also is an extremely common problem. Almost everyone faces it without an exception, and even people who have been practicing it for many years still continue to face the problem that they don't have consistent thoughtless awareness, or they have very little of it. They sit for meditation. There are people, I know so many people, that includes myself too, who will spend a lot of time and effort on meditation, but still are not able to get adequate level of thoughtless awareness. So that is also one powerful indicator of the struggle for spiritual depth, and a very tangible one at that. The next one is also pretty common, and in our sessions on Sahaj Online, we have in the past had some workshops on vibratory awareness, where we have explained what vibratory awareness means, how to develop it, how to use it in our daily lives, and so on. And this is also an extremely tangible and real sensation on our central nervous system. So, vibratory awareness essentially is the indication or the sensation that results on our central nervous system when our Kundalini energy is awakened, and through the Sahasrara we have this connection with the all-pervading power. Our spiritual self is fully active, you could say, and we are in that state of meditation. So when all of this happens, we can actually feel the sensation on our fingertips in the form of, you could say, a cool breeze, or some sort of a tingling, tickling sensation that is there on our hands and fingers. So that sensation is quite common. It is also easy to achieve. Nearly everybody who practices Sahaj tends to achieve it. If not on the first session or their first day, it eventually sets in. They are able to experience it in about a few weeks. Say 2 to 3 weeks is the average time. Some people take even longer, and some people take shorter, but typically they tend to feel this. Now that's again just the beginning. Feeling the vibrations is just the beginning. Vibrations requires a lot of depth. Vibrations are extremely nuanced. There are good vibrations, bad vibrations, strong vibrations, weak ones, and so on. It's a whole topic by itself. But if we find in our practice of Sahaj that we either have no vibrations or no vibratory awareness, or we have not felt vibrations up until now, then that's a type of challenge in being able to go deeper. And the thing is, all of these aspects that I'm stating, for lack of spiritual depth, do not necessarily coexist. So, for example, somebody could have thoughtless awareness but not feel vibrations, and somebody could feel vibrations, not have thoughtless awareness, or you could have neither, or you could have both, right? So, any of these can be true, or all of these can be true, or they can be true in some combination, and that's the uniqueness about this. Spirituality and the practice of spirituality is so nuanced. There are different ways in which we can actually sense whether we are going deeper or not. And lastly, the thing is that spiritual depth, this is one of the greatest breakthroughs of our lifetimes. To be able to awaken our Kundalini energy, to be able to reach that higher state of consciousness and meditation, it's, of all the achievements in our lives, easily it would be the most significant achievement, right? But somehow it doesn't feel so, right? We seem to be struggling, or we feel that for something to be so profound, why am I not seeing the benefits, right? Why am I not seeing a powerful gush of energy? And why doesn't everything fall into place? Now, if you have that feeling, then that also means that we are struggling to attain spiritual depth, or at least on a relative basis, struggling to go deeper in a very consistent manner, week after week, or month after month, or even year after year. So that's sort of definition of the problem. So I have attempted to define what characterizes challenges with going deeper, and these are some of the most important ones. The other one that's not mentioned over here is should be mentioned is that the positive changes in our behavior, right? If that is not happening, then that's also an indication that we are not going deeper. So somebody can have great thoughtless awareness, although it's not likely, but somebody could have some thoughtless awareness, could have vibratory awareness, could be spending a lot of time on meditation. But if the behavior is not progressing in the right direction, if we are not getting rid of some of our problems, the way we react, our qualities, our personality, character traits, if they are not improving with this, then I would say that definitely the indication is that the person is not progressing, right? It's very clear, because ultimate outcome for this practice is for us to become better people, for us to improve on our personality and character traits, right? So if that is regressing and everything else is progressing, it still is not a sign of good progress or enough progress. So that I have not mentioned it over here, but that's important to keep in mind. On the other hand, if we are able to see significant changes, positive changes in our behavior, and we are facing some of these issues such as lack of vibratory awareness and lack of thoughtless awareness, then I would still say that we are making good progress, right? Because from inside things are changing, and we are able to make some positive changes, which is the whole the goal or the outcome for the practice is being met to some extent. Then these things can be worked on, right? But vice versa, the reverse or the converse is not true. If we are having all of this, but our behavior is not improving, or rather it's regressing, then that's a problem that we've got to look into. Now, with that said, let's look at some of the root causes of this kind of a challenge of not being able to go deeper. Now, again, let's get to the actual mechanics of how the Kundalini energy works. I just mentioned that spirituality is about activating, enabling that energy to rise, awaken it, and then achieve that connection. Um, the we struggle with spiritual depth when the Kundalini energy does not rise smoothly. Now, if there are no blockages, no catches in our chakras anywhere, it's a smooth journey for the Kundalini energy, and in a split second it rises and goes and achieves the connection on a short-term basis, at least. This could be said as being able to achieve that state of meditation or the deeper state quite easily, right? So one of the reasons why we may be struggling for spiritual depth is we have problems in our chakras, right? It's getting caught up and facing some obstacles. But more importantly, the central channel that we have, there are three channels, energy channels in our spiritual system. The central channel, the left channel, and the right channel. In prior sessions, I have alluded to problems relating to the left channel, and we have discussed briefly the right channel and so on. But spiritual progress, spiritual depth, going deeper is entirely related to the central channel, and more so the widening of the central channel. So what is this widening of the central channel? When the Kundalini energy rises, or more strands of this energy rise, the greater the number of strands, what happens is, as it rises, it expands, or it pushes and widens the central channel. And that widening is the one that gives us a deeper and a stronger connection that we have. In fact, we should actually be able to feel the strength of our connection. If we go deep enough and long enough in this practice, we will be able to, on a relative basis, define and experience the difference in the strength of the connection. So, for instance, when we raise our energy each time, we will be able to, at that point in time, determine whether the connection is strong or weak, right? Whether just a few strands of the Kundalini energy have risen, or a number of strands. It's almost like a column of energy, right? That's a strong connection that we have. So in simple terms, you could say that when something is connected, or we are pulling something using a rope tied to it, right? If we have a thick rope, then obviously the ability to pull, the force is greater. But if we have just a very thin rope, right? Maybe one or two strands. Obviously, it's going to be much harder to pull that thing, right? The force exerted is going to be much less. Something similar, when more strands of the Kundalini energy rise, it widens the central column, and it also results in a stronger connection to this all-pervading power. And when the connection is strong, we receive the whole energy back inside our subtle energy system in a much better way, and that tends to cleanse and remove all the obstacles, as well as gives us the deeper state. So that's how the mechanics of it works. So it means that two things can be the cause. Either our chakras are all caught up, or some of them are caught up. Somewhere the Kundalini energy is trying to rise but hitting some obstacle. And second, the widening of the central channel is not happening enough. And we should also be aware that this whole process is in a way automatic, right? When I say in a way automatic, it's yes, we have to make that attempt to raise the energy and all that. But when we are in the right state, and we are in the right frame of mind, right attitude, right desire, right ambience, right people, and desire from inside is very strong, and we are surrendered, then all of these things can cause the automatic rising of the Kundalini energy. In fact, in many occasions, we don't even have to raise the energy just shoots up, right? I've been in places, as an example, where the vibrations, natural places, extremely powerful vibrations. And when I just walked in, I could see my Kundalini energy, I could feel it just shoot up, and many strands of it shoot up, and beautiful vibrations coming out. And I didn't have to raise my energy. I didn't have to even sit down in meditation and try to make an effort. I just fell into meditation. Now, that's an example of how almost nearly automatic it can be. But we have to be lucky enough to be in that kind of a place. And there are not many places on this earth like that. There may be some occasions, there may be some places, there may be some situations, depending on the activities we do. There are many things which can cause that. Equally well, there are many places I have been to where it's been a nightmare, so difficult to raise the energy no matter how much ever I try to focus, right? So you see the two ends of the spectrum, the two extremes, so to speak. So that is why I say that it is not just about our effort and the way we raise our energy. It's not like saying that, okay, now only one strand of my energy is risen. Let me try harder and focus. I will be able to make four strands rise. No, that's not the way it works. There is something from our side that we have to give, meaning our desire, our attention, and focus, and all that. But there are also extraneous circumstances and situations that work on this, and we will go over some of those as well. The next one is the other cause is if we are distracted, as simple as that, right? Do we want spirituality to be priority in our lives? Do we have it at the center of our lifestyle? And does everything revolve around it? Or is it just something that we are doing as maybe one out of the 10 other things that we are doing, right? It makes a big difference. Unfortunately, we have to, like everything else, if we want to be good at something, we have to commit to it. We have to give the time to it. That doesn't mean we have to give it an undue share or unfair share, so to speak. This does not take all our time. We can pretty much be in our lives in every other way, right? We can be we can be working, we can have a career, and we can have a job, we can have a family, we can have friends, we can have even entertainment, we can live in a home. Everything is normal, but the commitment needs to be there. It does have to be an important part of our lives. So if the attention that we give and the seriousness and the commitment is not there, and therefore the time is also that we give is also somewhat less, then obviously we're not going to get the return on it of the benefits, right? Therefore, the important thing is we have to make this a priority in our lives. The third thing is our life and attention can be cluttered with too many things, right? Even when we are giving it a priority and making it a lifestyle, even then, the world that we live in, we have too many things going on, right? So it's all coming down to our attention. If we are doing too many things, or we have so many different things that we get into, and all of it is having a strong impact on our attention, then the attention becomes wobbly. And once the attention, which is the vehicle of our consciousness, which is essentially the vehicle through which we have to get to that higher state of meditation, is busy, then we will have a problem going deeper spiritually. So we have to do two things. One is we have to make sure that those things are balanced properly. I'm not going to say eliminate all of the things. Many of those things might be useful, right? Or many of the things are necessary. We cannot do away with our jobs. We cannot do away with our families, for example. So they will be there, but we have to bring them in balance, right? And we have to make sure we compartmentalize our time, and we make sure that the other things in our life are not exerting too strong an attention, too strong an impact on our attention, so much so that the attention is wobbling and therefore not being able to meditate or go deeper, right? So that's the other root cause that we can look at. Those are the three important things, you could say. If we fix more than 80% of our problems, will get solved. So let's look at some of the solutions for resolving some of these problems, or the root causes that I just spoke about. The first thing is making the time and the commitment, and it is closely linked with the strength of the desire. So a lot of people, I've seen, and including myself, right, this happens many times. We tend to feel or make a decision or make a conclusion that I don't have enough time, so I'm not going to be able to spend time. And that's actually not the correct approach as far as spirituality is concerned, because all we need is not to look at the time or the effort, because spirituality can help you go beyond time. Literally, it can help you stretch time or create more time in your lives, and it does that in many ways, by solving problems, making things smoother, making your relationships better, by making the problems go away, and so many other benefits that are there. So you can actually, by spending more time on spirituality, it's like an investment. You could actually earn back a lot more time than the amount of time that you spent on spirituality. So it's something of that concept. And the second thing is that it works more less by way of time and effort, and more by way of the strength of the desire from our heart. If we have that strong, intense desire, then time will come our way. We will find that time almost makes itself available to us for practicing our spiritual activities, right? That is an extremely important concept, and most people struggle with that. The first thing that they look at is, oh, this is going to take a lot of time. Or do I have to meditate 2 times a day or 3 times a day? Do I have to do it for 20 minutes or even more? Do I have to attend collective meetings? And that's the immediate sort of thought process that goes on. And that's, I would say, not the correct approach, because that's not the first thing you should be thinking of. If we have the desire that I need to get better, I need to go deeper, and I need to explore this whole gamut of benefits that's going to do wonders for me in my life, then all we need to have is the strength of desire. And we will find that if our desire is strong and we are persistent, then our schedules will become flexible. It will adjust itself to make the time. And this, I cannot tell you how many times I have faced it myself. I have had situations when I've had to make a choice, and this was specifically with respect to doing programs. A program would come in the middle of the week when I had to go to an important meeting at work, right? At times, I used to say, in the initial phases, I used to say, you know what, I've got to do work, so let me not make time for that, right? And let me go ahead and I have to commit to my work and all of that. Then there were other times where I said, it's okay, I'm going to make a commitment. I'm going to go find the time. Time will make itself available. I will be able to go and do the Sahaj program for this audience, and spend just an hour with them. And guess what? Things at work used to work out. And my superior or my boss used to come and say, You can take a day off if you want, or you can take this couple of hours off. Literally, magically, time used to make itself available. So the difference was just in my desire and the strength of commitment. And that is true for everyone, whether it is our individual practice or whether we want to do something like, take meditation, speak about it to people. Time makes itself available when it comes to spirituality. It does not, it will leave you always net positive. Spiritual activities will leave you with more time than the amount of time that you spend or you feel you spend on it, right? That is an extremely valuable, I would say, lesson, and also a learning and an insight that people should take with them, because that is very true, right? So it's no longer a problem. Time and commitment will not become a problem. Initially it might seem so, but if we commit to it and we keep our attention on it and we increase our strength of our desire, then things will just make way, and we will be able to focus on our meditation, on attending more collective meetings, and so on and so forth. The second thing is collectivity. This also is extremely important. A lot of people feel, can I learn meditation? Can I just, continue to practice at home? Sure, you can. And it is a must. It must be done that way too. But ultimately, spiritual depth comes from attending or being collective, so to speak. And that's because this whole phenomenon is a phenomenon of collectivity, the phenomenon of our spiritual selves going deeper and being able to, you could say, attain greater depths. We cannot rise individually. We can rise individually, but only up to a point. At some point, we have to seek out, be part of the larger group meditations as much as we can, so that we can harness the collective energy, and then that can help us solve our problems and then go higher. Without collectivity, it is a simple statement that I can make, that we will not be able to go deeper. Period. No matter how expert the person is, you can learn meditation, and in fact, both are necessary. This is not to say that collectivity is the only thing that's needed. An equal amount of individual work at home, learning how to meditate, reading, understanding, all of those things are important. But if we have to really go deeper, it has to be through the mechanism of more and more collective meetings and collective meditation sessions. So that's another important input. The third thing, I spoke about the problem about how our chakras might be caught up and clogged up. So it is important to understand how that happens. The what we put our attention on, I spoke about how we put our attention. Our attention is taken up by so many things. So what we put our attention on, we should largely be focusing on positive things in our attention. Food is also something where we take in a lot of negativity. So um, if we eat a lot of food that's not cooked by us or heavily processed and so on, there are many reasons. Or we eat from food from places where there's a lot of negative energy and so on. There is a good chance that we can contract a lot of these negative things, which can again put a pressure on our attention and struggle, right? So while we don't want to go any extremes, we cannot eliminate anything in our lives. We may not be able to eliminate eating out or eating processed food, but the balance is what counts, right? And keeping this as an input, and as a fact that yes, we are prone to contracting negativities and clogging our chakras even through food, is useful to know, right? Then the activities that we do also have an impact on our chakras. The positive activities tend to stimulate, for example, creative activities, being in nature, relaxing, positive people and ambience, and all of that may tend to refresh us. Artistic activities, for example. But then excessive thinking, problem solving, if we use too much of our left side, or we use too much of our left side in being too emotional, and so on and so forth. So depending on all the activities that we do, then that can have an impact on our chakras as well. The ambience or the environment, the people that we come in contact with, can also have an impact. So on a given day and in a given week, you could say all of these aspects have an impact on the quality of, you could say, our chakras, and that in turn has an impact on how easily the Kundalini can rise, right? And if the Kundalini has problems or obstacles in our chakras, then we again face issues. We are not able to go deeper. So you could literally spend weeks, days or weeks or even months just touching the surface, doing some meditation, maybe going through the motions, doing a 15-20 minute of meditation, but not being able to go deeper in any of those sessions, right? And that's a classical problem that we face. So as long as we are sensitive to this, and we again try to go after things that can not have a negative impact on our chakras, then that is highly recommended. The rigor and discipline of meditation routine is also important. As I said, while collectivity and collective meditations are important, it helps to meditate 2 times, and I would say if we are not progressing, even 3 times a day, right? And at least 15 or 20 minutes. The time that we spend is also important, though the quality of meditation is important. The time that we spend has to be there as a first, right? We have to give it so much time. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to give ourselves a chance to actually go deeper. So the rigor that we put in, what we do in our meditations, and how much we pay attention and so on is also important. Longer, deeper meditation. This is something that we could try. Keep experimenting with it as to what combination works. For a lot of people, the collective group meditations really works. Sometimes we do even 25, 30 minute, 40, 45 minute even, right? And in some of my sessions, we have done that in the past and people have felt deeper. We may or may not have that time to do it on an individual basis, but it's worthwhile trying, right? And pushing the limit every single time. And there are so many people who get stuck on, okay, this 5, 10, 15 minute kind of a routine. I don't have more time than this, right? I think we have to break that and say what happens, right? If somebody has been doing meditation for 15 minutes a day and just once in the morning, how does a meditation 3 times a day for half an hour a day feel, right? That's an experiment that we should be willing to do, right? While there is no real prescription on this is the number of times and the length of meditation, it is left to individuals to do. I think that pushing ourselves to do longer and deeper meditation, at least longer, deeper is something that will manifest on its own. I think even if we stretch the time, and what can happen, right? If we are spending regularly 15 minutes and we decide to spend say 45 minutes on meditation, what can happen? We can be thoroughly bored for the extra 30 minutes, impatient, restless. Even that will give us feedback, right? That's the point. So even in that extra 30 minutes, we would have learned a lot about ourselves. We would have learned about what is our problem, right? Is it because we are not able to sit in one place for more than 15 minutes? Is it because we are able to sit but we have too many thoughts? Or what is the problem, right? And that will be the beginning for us to get deeper, right? So that is again highly recommended that we push ourselves to go longer and deeper. On a technique level, I would say use of the earth element more often definitely helps. And the reason for that is the earth sucks in the problem. So I spoke about the negativity clogging up our chakras. The coming in contact with the earth is an extremely good way and easy way for all the negativities to pass on to the earth. So as much as we can, and I know that it's winter in many places and it's hard to go out and sit on a lawn or something, but if we can still force ourselves to do that, spending more time in contact with the earth, and then even doing meditation on the earth, or even just barefoot walking on the earth, which may not be possible in winter, but the earth element is a powerful way to cleanse and makes it easier for us to get rid of negativities from within our system. That's another solution. Then make use of some of the advanced techniques. Again, that's with a word of caution. Now, I know that many of you who are here attending this session are already part of the advanced sessions that we have, and it's a journey. We have spent a lot of time in trying to explain the advanced concepts. We have mantras, we have deep spiritual things, aspects within the chakras, and so on and so forth. and all those are highly recommended, because end of the day we have to continuously improve on and go deeper and use some of the more advanced techniques. But having said that, the important caveat in Sahaj is not how much of more advanced or whether we go to the advanced techniques, but are we doing it the right way? And the right way is doing it from the heart, right? And knowing what we are doing and focusing on the experience. More knowledge or merely doing the advanced things just for the sake of it is not going to get us anywhere. We are probably better off just doing the simple things, meditation 3 times a day and collective meditation, for example, right? Simple. We may not know much, we may not do a lot of things. It is still possible to attain that deep state of meditation, and that's the beauty. So it is not in some ways it is not directly proportional. It is not like saying, okay, I'm doing only the simple techniques, I cannot go deeper. That's not true at all, right? On the other hand, advanced techniques are also useful sometimes to break through if you are doing all the basics right. And if you still haven't felt the deeper experience, maybe it's time to go deeper and explore. But that doesn't mean we have to use the advanced techniques all of the time. And that does not mean that those who are not doing the advanced techniques are at a disadvantage. That is not the case at all. So it is not like a university or a school, the first grade, second grade, and third grade, or undergraduate and postgraduate. It's not like that at all. Somebody can know nothing about Sahaj, right? But they can have such simple, pure, strong desire in their hearts that they can hit that deep state of meditation a lot easier than somebody who's been then so many years in the system practicing, knows a lot of stuff, doing a lot of mantras, right? And that is reality today. We have those kind of people who are extremely simple, but yet so deep and so simple and so nice, and they are at complete peace with themselves. Then we have those people who know a lot of stuff, who a lot of complications and everything, but still don't have as deep an experience, right? So the point about advanced techniques is that they help, but they are one additional thing in your tool set for you to learn and understand. If you feel you don't need them and you can still focus on the basics, by all means that can help you go deeper, right? If you do even the simple techniques right, a 10-minute meditation, high quality meditation, pure thoughtless awareness for 9 minutes out of the 10 minutes will give you a whole lot more benefit than reciting mantras for 30 minutes. I can tell you that out of experience. And I do that. It's not like every morning I wake up and I do all kinds of fancy stuff. No. Sometimes it is just sitting, trying to focus attention, trying to be in that thoughtless state. How long can I be there? As simple as that. Sometimes it is just going outside, sitting on that lawn and sitting there, just enjoying, right? And that can be my meditation, right? So simpler techniques can also give you the depth. It's just that when you have more tools available to you, sometimes they can help you break the plateau. That's all. And finally, I think the widening of the central channel, I spoke about this. We can actually try many things in our environment, which can, this automatic widening and Kundalini rising and getting cleared out. I did mention that part of it is our effort and what we do and our desire and all that, but a lot of it is also our circumstances, our environment. So if we are mindful of that, so being in nature, for example, definitely enhances vibrations, remove the catches, right? That's one thing. The more natural things, the more in nature we are, and the more natural things we surround ourselves with, like wood and all of that, instead of plastics and TV screens and all of that. The more in nature we are, the easier it is for the Kundalini to rise. Second is, the right kind of music can definitely enhance our experience. I've had situations where music can simply raise my Kundalini. I don't have to do anything. I simply sit. The right kind of music, high quality music, can help the Kundalini rise automatically, right? Collectivity, I've been in those meetings, 4,000 people, meditators sitting, right? Just walk in, and before I do anything, my Kundalini is right there, right? And I don't even have to sit down. Standing, I'm sitting and I'm standing and meditating. That can also have an effect. The people that we come in touch with, right? Many times positive people, positive exchanges of thoughts and emotions and all of that can actually help us a lot. The ambience that we go to, right? There can be bad places and there can be good places as well. But in a holistic manner, if we are able to focus on what aids our Kundalini energy more and causes it to rise smoothly, or sometimes even the blockages and the blocks and the catches tend to go away almost on their own. Those will help as well. So that is the combination of solutions and suggestions that I have. Obviously, there are more to share, but these I could say that are the top in my mind. And if we focus on just this list, and it's pretty long list by itself, if we are aware of this, there is again no need to rush into doing all of this. It's not easy. It again will require time and all of that. But gradually, if we can keep this in mind, and then we can use these as tools to overcome whatever problems you are facing from the going deeper perspective, then that will be good. So that brings us to the end of the topic that I wanted to discuss, and I know that I've spoken for a long time. So we'll continue our meditation now. Go into our meditation, and let's spend at least 10 minutes. And if somebody has to leave, that's fine. But we'll continue to meditate for at least 15 minutes today, and we'll go 5 minutes past our time. So let's desire first for a deep session of meditation. Close our eyes. Keep our hands on our laps, fingers stretched out. Watch our breathing for a few moments to turn our attention inward. Let's first of all express a strong desire from our heart to go deeper, to overcome all our problems and struggles in our lives, and make a commitment to spirituality. The next thing we want to do is surrender. So let's acknowledge the presence of the all pervading universal divine energy and surrender to that energy. Ask that energy to take over our lives and guide us. The next thing we want to do is address our own Kundalini energy. It is our spiritual mother, or she is our spiritual mother. Let's make a humble request to our own individual Kundalini energy to help us overcome our problems, to help us give the discretion and wisdom to pursue spirituality. And now we can raise our Kundalini energy. Let's take our attention to the Sahasrara, the crown of the head. Take our right hand and place our palms on the Sahasrara and say a few affirmations. Please establish my self realization. Please grant me the state of meditation and the state of thoughtless awareness. Please help me rise above all my problems, my ego and superego. And let's take our right hand back on our laps. And now, with eyes closed, let's keep our attention on the Sahasrara. Keep our attention alert to watch for thoughts. If they do come, just ignore them and let them pass by. Let's now slowly open our eyes, thank the our own individual Kundalini energy for having given us this opportunity to go higher. Now we'll slowly raise our Kundalini energy to conclude the meditation. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's session, and hopefully, it was beneficial to you. We'll continue again next week with a new topic, and hopefully, the meditation was good. It was actually pretty deep for me, so I'm hoping you're able to feel some difference compared to when you do it alone at home. If you have any questions, as always, please feel free to write back to me and submit questions through our support line. Otherwise, thank you, and I'll see you next week.